Is the ultimate horror the nuclear attack here? Are we approaching a terrifying global massacre? President Vladimir Putin threatened to use nuclear weapons against NATO nations if they interfered in Ukraine. Russia will respond immediately, Putin said, adding, "The consequences will be unprecedented in your history." But is Russia using nuclear weapons? What would happen if they did so? In this video, we are going to check out whether Russia is using nuclear weapons and what would happen if they did so. Hello everyone, welcome to the Ukraine War. We are here to deliver to you all the new political moves regarding the Russia-Ukraine conflicts, the casualties, strategies, and the aftermaths of the ongoing war in detail. Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon if you don't want to miss any of those. That being said, let's begin. On February 27th, Putin ordered Russia's nuclear forces to be placed in a special mode of combat duty, which has substantial implications for Russia's nuclear weapons launch protocols. According to Russian nuclear weapons specialists, Russia's command and control system is incapable of transmitting launch orders during peacetime. Therefore, changing the status to war permits a launch order to be transmitted and carried out. Outside Russia, this is considered a road for them to use its nuclear weapons in a first-strike surprise assault. Putin characterized this as a defensive response to the imposition of economic sanctions, but it is seen as a pathway for Russia to use its nuclear weapons in a first-strike surprise attack. This is a potentially dangerous circumstance in which contradictory communications and the possibility of misunderstanding might lead to decisions being taken based on incorrect assumptions. Nuclear weapons have a long history of near calls. During the Cold War, nuclear weapons deterrence was based mainly on the concept of mutually assured destruction, or MAD. The concept underlying MAD is that the misery and destruction caused by nuclear weapons are sufficient to dissuade aggressive action and conflict. However, in the age of cyber attacks that may disrupt nuclear weapons command and control, the applicability of deterrence theory to post-Cold War circumstances is widely debated and significantly more problematic. The Global Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty recognizes 5 nuclear weapons countries: China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Almost every nation in the world is a signatory to the NPT, but 3 more countries, India, Pakistan, and North Korea, publicly acknowledged their nuclear weapons ownership outside of the treaty, while Israel has not disclosed its nuclear weapons possession but is presumed to have them. Nuclear weapons are classified according to their delivery vehicles and launch platforms, which include land, sea, and air missiles, as well as short, intermediate, and long-range missiles. Under the new START deal, which aims to limit and monitor nuclear weapons between the U.S. and Russia, the two nations share information on their strategic, long-range nuclear missiles. However, after the U.S. decides to withdraw from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty in 2019, there are no longer any agreements between the two countries governing the quantity or deployment of ground-launched nuclear missiles with a range of 500 to 5,500 kilometers. The 1991 presidential nuclear initiatives resulted in the withdrawal and storage of short-range nuclear weapons, although they are not subject to any legal restrictions. It was anticipated that if Russia used nuclear weapons, it would do so in reaction to the Ukrainian crisis, rather than attacking a NATO member, which would trigger Article 5 of the Washington Treaty and prompt a complete NATO response. Short-range, low-yield battlefield nuclear bombs, of which there are estimated to be over 1,000 in reserve, would be the most likely to be employed in such an assault. These would have to be retrieved from storage and attached to missiles, bombers, or artillery shells. Putin recently oversaw a drill that tested military command and control, combat troops, battleships, and strategic missile carriers, as well as strategic nuclear and non-nuclear weapon dependability. Russia's aerospace forces, Southern Military District, Strategic Missile Forces, Northern Fleet, and Black Sea Fleet took part in the exercise. Any action to prepare and deploy Russian nuclear weapons would be observed and monitored by the U.S. and foreign satellites, which can see through clouds and at night. Depending on other intelligence and analysis, as well as the failure of all diplomatic efforts to persuade Russia, NATO nations may opt to intervene to prevent the launch by hitting storage and missile deployment facilities ahead of time. However, there are significant dangers connected with this option, since an attack may provoke a significantly more serious response from Russia, and could be perceived as an act of aggression by NATO rather than a defensive one. Not to preempt, on the other hand, leaves Ukraine and other nations vulnerable to nuclear weapons blasts, which might result in hundreds of thousands of deaths depending on the target. NATO nations would most certainly retaliate if Russia attacked Ukraine with nuclear weapons, claiming that the damage of nuclear weapons crosses boundaries and impacts countries bordering Ukraine. NATO has numerous options for retaliating, including employing conventional troops on Russian strategic assets or retaliating in kind with nuclear weapons. The U.S. has roughly 150 B-61 nuclear gravity bombs stationed in 5 NATO nations: Belgium, Germany, the Netherlands, Italy, and Turkey, and the U.S., the U.K., and France have long-range nuclear assault capacity under NATO auspices. However, both possibilities result in NATO being pushed into a big confrontation with Russia, so the advantage of deferring nuclear reprisal and announcing that reaction now is that Putin will be unable to depict NATO as a nuclear weapons threat. Putin's decision to launch a long-range ballistic missile assault on the U.S. is seen to be exceedingly unlikely, but he understands, as do all his officials, that this would spell the end of Russia. Ukraine, along with Belarus and Kazakhstan, housed Soviet nuclear missiles as part of the USSR, and towards the conclusion of the Cold War, Ukraine had around one-third of the Soviet Union's nuclear weapons, but did not have authority over them, and so could not fire them. Ukraine pledged to join the NPT as a non-nuclear weapon state in 1994, and to hand up all nuclear weapons to Russia for destruction by 1996. The Budapest Memorandum was signed by Russia, the UK, and the United Governments, as well as Ukraine, Belarus, and Kazakhstan, to give security assurances if the former Soviet states joined the NPT as non-nuclear armed states. The memorandum agreed that Belarusian, Kazakh, and Ukrainian independence and sovereignty would be respected within existing borders, that parties would refrain from threatening or using force against Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine, particularly nuclear weapons, and that economic pressure would not be used to influence their politics. They also promised quick UN Security Council action to assist Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine if they were the victims or targets of an act of aggression or a threat of attack involving nuclear weapons. Belarus voted on February 27 in a stage-managed national referendum on constitutional revisions to enable Russian military and nuclear weapons to be housed permanently in violation of the Budapest Memorandum's conditions. Belarus also authorized Russian forces to attack Ukraine from the north through Belarusian territory. Speaking of danger, what role does nuclear weapons play? The NPT's third pillar encourages the peaceful use of nuclear energy by distinguishing between having civil nuclear power plants and creating nuclear weapons. Although some nations see civil nuclear energy production as a proliferation danger, there are several ways to check a country's status, including IAEA safeguards and verification, as well as export control regimes. Ukraine has 15 nuclear reactors dispersed around the nation, and nuclear power provides half of the country's electricity. Nuclear power accounts for 54% of the country's energy output, followed by coal 29%, natural gas 8%, hydro 5%, solar 2%, and wind 2%. Ukraine's civil nuclear energy program, on the other hand, is reliant on Russian nuclear fuel because all 15 reactors are Russian VVER types, with some being updated to newer versions. However, Ukraine has begun to strengthen energy cooperation with the European Union in recent years. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine caught fire in 1986, generating a severe radiation disaster that lasted for years and caused immense damage. The site is no longer used for energy production. The fire site has been rendered safe, and the EU has been working with Ukraine to build a storage facility at Chernobyl. However, as part of the invasion, the Russian military assumed control of the Chernobyl site, although it is unclear why, either due diligence and theft prevention or to terrify individuals who believe Chernobyl is still a threat. Although a missile assault on a nuclear power station may result in a significant radiological event, it is not as hazardous as a nuclear weapon detonation, which would have considerably greater explosive force, flames, radiation, and radioactive fallout. When the United States launched nuclear bombs on Japan, it had no idea how dangerous the fallout and radiation would be. A nuclear weapon was just a faster, more efficient technique for the Truman government to destroy a city. Both the Soviet Union and the U.S. amassed nuclear arsenals during the Cold War. However, subsequent secretaries general and presidents chose not to use them. The difficulty is that a stigma is stronger when the action being stigmatized is new. The last nuclear detonation during a conflict was more than 75 years ago. There is little chance that other states would wait another 75 years if Russia used even a low-yield tactical nuclear bomb. the impact of each chemical weapons assault faded. Some experts even reasoned that whether the victims were killed by a bomb or a chlorine cloud made no difference to them. Many people chastised President Barack Obama for failing to stick to his red line after Syrian President Bashar al-Assad used chemical weapons because it implied that the cost of using them again would be little. Expect other countries to utilize tactical nuclear weapons within a decade if Russia does. According to him, a Russian attack on Ukraine may be a green signal for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The international community may demand that Israel or the U.S. reply with similar or lower yields. Such yield limits, on the other hand, would gradually dissolve with each usage. Putin is attempting to instill fear in everyone. Each country, including the U.S., the U.K., and France, has its nuclear deterrent. As a result, if Putin's Russia becomes dumb enough to consider a nuclear invasion, Russia itself will suffer catastrophic repercussions. He can make threats and put weapons on alert, but he knows very well that if he ever used them, the repercussions would be horrific and destructive. The world's leaders have long admired Ukraine's President Zelensky, who has continuously advocated for peace and discussions, even in the face of the most heinous provocation. And if a diplomatic approach to a peaceful conclusion can be found, all the better. With that being said, that takes us to the end of the episode. What do you think? Would Russia do such destructive stupidity? Tell us in the comment box. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't hesitate to subscribe to our channel and push notifications bell to keep up with our work. See you soon. Until then, peace.